Un de test, un test.
Okay, so good afternoon. Thank you to join us. And we can start, I hope. All good. Dear Madam Special Rapporteur, dear distinguished speakers, and dear colleagues, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's panel discussion co-organized by the Czech Republic, Uruguay, and Colombia, focusing on one of our long-standing human rights priorities, the freedom of peaceful assembly and of association. These rights are not abstract principles for us. They are deeply rooted in our own history, including the legacy of the Velvet Revolution, where citizens coming together peacefully demonstrated the transformative power of civic space. As such, we see the protection of these freedoms as a continuous responsibility, particularly in a time of rapid technological change. That is a new challenge we did not have to face in 1989, but many have to nowadays. Today's discussion is both timely and necessary. We are here to reflect on the findings of the Special Rapporteur's report on the impact of digital surveillance on civil society. The report provides compelling evidence that surveillance is no longer an exceptional tool, but an increasingly normalized feature of our digital environments. It shows that a pervasive and often invisible monitoring creates what is described as a chilling effect. Individuals modify their behavior out of fear of being watched and of possible consequences for their actions. They refrain from attending assemblies, limit their associations, and censor their expressions. Importantly, these effects do not stop at the individual level. They fragment movements, erode trust within communities, and ultimately shrink civic space. What is particularly striking is the report's conclusion that these harms are cumulative and interconnected, and surveillance does not affect only privacy or expression in isolation. It impacts the very ability of individuals and groups to organize, mobilize, and participate in public life. At the same time, international human rights law remain clear. Any interference with these rights must meet the strict test of legality, necessity, and proportionality. Yet, as the report highlights, these safeguards are often weakened in practice, including through broad legal frameworks and insufficient oversight. This brings us to a central question for today: how we ensure that technological progress strengthens rather than undermines civic space. In this regard, the Czech Republic believes that states have a primary responsibility to create and maintain a safe and enabling environment for civil society, both offline and online. So, thank you, and let me now turn to our distinguished panel. We are honored to welcome Mrs. Gina Romero, UN Special Rapporteur on the rights of the freedom of peaceful assembly and of association. And we are also joined by Mr. Dara Murray from Queen Mary University of London via video. We have Mr. Tim Engelhardt from the OHCHR Digital Technologies and Human Rights section. And we are pleased to welcome Mr. Archias Sophocles Guiamares Soares Cruz from Conectas Directos Humanos.
We were practicing.
We were practicing. The discussion will be moderated by Mr. Clement Boule, former UN Special Rapporteur on these rights. So, dear colleagues, as the report reminds us, the strength of our commitments will ultimately be measured by the reality on the ground. Ensuring that people can freely assemble and associate without fear of surveillance or reprisal is essential for any democratic society. I look forward to today's discussion and to your valuable contributions. Thank you. So, can we start?
Yes, thank you very much, Your Excellency.
You're welcome.
Ambassador, permanent representative of the Czech Republic. And let me just first introduce myself. I'm Clement Boule. As Ambassador mentioned, the former Special Rapporteur on the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and peaceful association. And then currently a member of the Commission of Inquiry of the North Kivu and South Kivu. So I want to welcome you first to this important, I will call them interactive side events, because that's what we are going to do in the few minutes that we have. Before maybe starting, I think the ambassador already set up the scene on why we are here. So we need to hear from the person that brought all of us here to understand why we are here. So Gina, you just presented reports to the Human Rights Council about the digital surveillance. So my first question is, what is really behind this mask of digital surveillance? And can you give us some highlights? My suggestion to you is that as soon as, after we hear from Gina, I will then turn to the floor, ask you to ask 3 questions, and then I will go back to the panelists. Usually we want to book some time for the interactive, and we don't have it. So let us put this in the presentation. So thank you, Gina. Can you tell us a little more?
Yeah, sure.
Once again, thank you, Ambassador, for all the support that Czechia provides to my mandate, which is actually fundamental. And then also thank you to Uruguay and Colombia for co-sponsoring and being here with us. And then thanks to big portion of my research team is also here. So Dr. Gina Romero, Professor Pete Fusey, and Sonia Merkova, who were also very important in the drafting of the collection of the information, the processing of the information, and drafting of the report. So this report, it was very difficult for me to do because we were trying to identify or to put together two issues that are really difficult to handle or to make a dialogue between them. So one is surveillance. So surveillance, we are living in a context in which we have a lot of real problematic security issues. We are living in a world that is on a counterterrorism quest, and in that same with a lot of issues related to cybercrime and so on. But in the same time, surveillance has been promoted as the big response and the big solution to all these problems. But at the end, we don't know yet if that is actually a real solution, and if the use of surveillance is actually helping us to tackle all these problems. So this is one of the big portion of what we wanted to bring to this report, and the other one is the chilling effects. So chilling effects like ghosts, right? Everybody talks about it, but then nobody can actually just say that they are real or just to prove it. And then this is why, for me, it was very important to put these two together, just to try to figure out which is the impact of the digital surveillance that we are having worldwide, and then which are the chilling effects that it's creating in the rights of freedom of assembly and of association. And what we found is that the chilling effects goes beyond these two rights. So it goes in the exercise and the possibility to come together and to exercise these rights, but also to participate, to access to the provision of services that actually guarantee other type of rights, and also you name it. It creates a compound harm on many other rights. So the idea of the report is this. For those of you that have been following the reports that I've presented in the past, and even some of reports of Clement's, the securitization and the counterterrorism agenda have been fueling the adoption of a lot of the legitimizing of the monitoring of and the use of many different types of surveillance tools to monitor and crime prevention. But at the same time, there is a legal use of these tools, but then there's also at some point a reckless use of those tools, and then a malign use of those tools. And those are the three different issues that we also cover in the report. Perhaps you read the report, and if you didn't, please do it. But then I want to focus on the actually important effects of chilling effect. I'm not going to define chilling effect because Dr. Murray will do it. But then I want to mention specifically some of the more impacts, some of the conclusions that were more impactful in the review that I did. One is how the perceived real or the real or perceived surveillance, it's actually affecting the possibility for people to trust each other, and trust is the base of the collective rights and the base of the rights that I have in my mandate. So if you don't trust anybody, you can't associate or you can't assemble. And then when you erode this trust, you create a process of dissocialization that actually it's not only cutting the ties between movements and associations with the people they want to serve, or with allies, or with each other, but also it's affecting deeply the social fabric and the connections, the personal connections of the people who is actually advocating for rights and acting collectively, including the people who go to the streets to protest. So associations are heavily affected. Associations need to besides going beyond the fear that creates a surveillance, associations need to reroute some funding or efforts to actually counter the harm that the surveillance is doing, especially for those associations in which their personal or devices or the institutional devices are compromised by, for example, spyware. So they create a burden for the association to actually counter the harm that this creates, but also for just to create new security measures, even digital security measures, that is also rerouting some of the resources, the scarce resources that the civil society has. In other places, is also diverting this fear is actually making associations and individuals to change their actions and to change their objectives, and that affects deeply the possibility for associations to actually reach their choosing objectives of the missions, and then also is creating a deep mental health toll in individuals that are in civil society that are directly affected by the surveillance, but also in those individuals that are close to the people who is affected by the surveillance, even if the surveillance is perceived and is not sure that is happening. So at the end, this is affecting not only the collective action, but it's also affecting the way in which individuals engage with journalists, with even lawyers, human rights defenders, and then just the different actions that they can do for express and do their activism. So at the end, those are like the main points that I wanted to raise today. And then I really want to hear from you. How did the report land? What do you think about the different recommendations, and what can we also do together to bring those recommendations forward? So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Gina. And I think usually we always think that the surveillance is a privacy issue. It's about freedom of expression, like Ambassador was saying. But you are now telling us that surveillance is more than that. It affects individuals, but it affects our collective engagement in the public life. Thank you very much. So before coming to you, Dara, as one of the co-authors of the reports, let me turn to you. So I'm sure you came here to hear something. You came here with some question in your mind. I would like just to take 3. It's not time for comments. It's just question. In 3 minutes, who want to go first? It's your only chance now. I think you are all experts on this. I mean, it affects your life. It affects you. So who want to go? Yes, please. Question, not comment, please.
Why not? Matthew with Human Rights House Foundation. Thank you already for those opening comments. Just one very quick comment before my question. When I first joined my organization 9 years ago, we had an internal discussion and we decided we were essentially a very, very small fish in a large pond. And as far as surveillance was concerned, we didn't have so many worries. Now that has completely changed. And it's not because we became a bigger fish, by no means. It's because the digital tools available to states and other actors have become much more powerful. And so now the threat, not just for us, but particularly for our civil society partners across wider Europe and especially Eastern Europe, is significant. My question is really, okay, given that we have this perception, how do we overcome this perception? Like, what are the kind of practical steps that various actors can be taking to make sure that we kind of reduce this perception? Because we had a few comments yesterday in the interactive dialogue around subjectivity and kind of the role of subjectivity. So how do we overcome this? Thank you.
Thank you. The next quick question. Are you government? Are you concerned about these chilling effects of the surveillance? Are you civil society? What is your perspective on that? Okay, I know traditionally we don't do it like that, but I thought it would be important to hear from you first. But anyway, you will get the second chance, but it will not be a lot of time. So let then go to Darren. You, as a co-author of this report, can you dig a little bit on the some of the key finding and recommendation, because I saw here that what impressed me is that you also have over 150 consultation, Gina. You also 13 states, 63, and also the monitoring or the reports also highlights experience from 84 countries. So meaning that the surveillance, the chilling effect of surveillance is really worldwide issue, right? It's not limited to those countries that have powerful technology. So can you tell us a little more about that? And in particular, I'm interested also to understand, if I'm company or corporation in this room, how can I prevent that from when I'm doing my products, which states want to use to probably fight against crime? Then it end by being using to under my freedom of association and assembly. How can I prevent it?
We have all the answers. Come on.
That's you can. That's the last question.
Great. Thanks. So thank you very much. I'll begin by saying that maybe two factors brought an urgency to this examination of the chilling effects with the authority of the Special Rapporteur. The first is the idea that as we move, which the ambassador mentioned, as we moved towards a digital society, we dramatically increased state surveillance capabilities. And I think this speaks to the point that was just made. And we're moving towards an era of pervasive surveillance where opting out of digital surveillance or opting out of digital technology is essentially impossible. And it's really important at this juncture to understand what the impacts of that surveillance are. You know, this is the first time in human history that the state has had the capability to look into the lives of most of its citizens at a relatively low cost. And that capability is only likely to increase in the future. So it's a really urgent question. And the importance of looking at the chilling effects is the importance of understanding what's the changed reality of digital surveillance, essentially so that we're not trying to bring an analog solution to a digital problem. The second is the idea that although the chilling effects are understood theoretically, academically, they're often not addressed or they're often dismissed in legal or policy discussions. This because of claims that either the chilling effects are too subjective, which is the question that was just made. So that's the idea that how do you evaluate something that is experienced differently from person to person? And the second is that they're impossible to improve. And that's based on the idea that a chilling effect is binary. So how do you prove that somebody didn't go to a protest or didn't attend a meeting because of the chilling effects? So in order to address this, and this is why we came to the number of people, we developed a really specific methodology. So as Kamal mentioned, we interviewed a number of different people across a range of contexts, across a range of government systems, across a range of professions and a range of political motivations. So the idea is to obtain a qualitative understanding of people's experiences at scale and a global reach. This was done explicitly to address whether there's a common core to the chilling effects of surveillance, to address the claims of subjectivity. And the conclusion, as set out by Gina in the report, is that there is, so that irrespective of the context, the impacts of surveillance are commonly experienced. And I can discuss those in a moment. The second point is that the interviews also underline that chilling effects aren't binary. So it's not the case simply that people don't attend or don't do something. It's really much more nuanced. So it's much more common that people modify their behavior. So they participate differently, and often that means they participate less effectively. And so that directly counters the argument that you can't prove a negative, because you don't need to prove a negative because the chilling effects are much more nuanced. So I'll highlight a couple of the common experiences. The first, as I mentioned, chilling effects aren't binary, that they change how people modify their behavior. That's really important because in the face of surveillance, it can seem that people are acting normally. You know, civil society still exists, protests still happen, but the impact of the chilling effects is that people have modified their behavior. So it can give the impression that that there's business as usual, things are proceeding as normal, whereas in reality, which is something Gina spoke to, the effectiveness of how the organizations operate really is undermined. Another point is that the chilling effects impact the public visibility of different actors. So people are less willing to step forward, less willing to be in public. You know, we've seen cases, or we interview people where people literally took the signs off the front of their offices. Obviously, that has a huge impact on mobilization and the ability to organize, because obviously key to advocacy is visibility. You know, we talk about speaking truth to power. If you can't speak the truth, or if you can't speak, it's a really big issue. A final point which is an interesting thing to grapple with, is that digital surveillance tools are more remote and more ubiquitous. You know, they're everywhere, but they're much less visible. That presents a real problem from the perspectives of civil society in terms of challenging it. You know, how do you know what's happening? How do you have the evidence that surveillance is occurring, and so that you can challenge it effectively? And that almost shifts the balance of power very much in favor of the state. So almost by not saying what's happening, it makes it harder and harder to challenge. What this all means, and what emerges as a very clear finding of the report, is that chilling effects combine to fundamentally interfere with organizations or groups and individuals' ability to exercise their rights. And I think that's the real key point from the report. It's not just the idea that there's an interference with the right. It's the nature of that interference totally undermines the ability for those rights to be effective. And obviously from an association and assembly point of view, that's really fundamental, because if you can't associate or assemble, you know, you can't advocate for other rights. So it really is an insidious interference that strikes at the core. So it affects individuals or organizations' ability to organize, to mobilize, to advocate. And that reduces, obviously, the possibilities for difference, for diversity, and for contestation that are so important to societal well-being. So that's kind of the second level impact. It's not only an impact on individuals or organizations' ability to associate and assemble, but it has a really potentially profound societal impact.
Thank you very much, Darren, and thanks for the. So, chilling effects and digital technology, and by in society where those technology are produced to protect, let's say, democracy, they end by really restricting them, because protecting democracy is also fight against crime, but then some states are using it to really impact our freedom, in particular freedom of association and peaceful assembly. So I'm coming back to you now, Tim. I mean, we always say that it's important in a society that is the public space is restricted. Marginal groups rely on technology, on digital space to express themselves and to participate. So what is the impact of chilling effect when we hear Gina reports and when we look at it? So how marginal groups are affected by this phenomenon?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon. Thank you, Clément, and thank you for the invitation here. And I, first of all, really want to congratulate you, Special Rapporteur, and Pete and Derek for excellent work on the report and the underlying study. It's the focus of the report on the chilling effects, plus the cumulative effects of surveillance and the compound harms, is something that I think goes really to the core of many questions that we worry about when we think about digitalization and surveillance. And while there have been discussions about surveillance for many about chilling effects for many years, and maybe Pete may recall how excited I was many years ago, I think in Vienna, where we were discussing facial recognition technologies, when he told me that he would embark on a project on chilling effects. And I thought, finally, there will be maybe more substance, because as Derek said, it's so difficult to quantify, so difficult to find evidence, and so easy to dismiss, but goes to the core, as the report shows, to how rights can be enjoyed, how they can be exercised, how pluralistic societies work. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this, reflecting on our own reporting and experiences and insights from the work at the office. I myself was included in several of our reports on the right to privacy, on protests, etc., where chilling effects came up, but we didn't have the space to go to the depth we have here. So I'm very excited that we have this here. And let me also just weave in a quote of the Supreme Court of India in a ruling on the Pegasus spyware software, where the court held that the chilling effect of surveillance would be an assault on the vital public watchdog role of the press. I feel like I'm repeating certain things that have been said, and I'm doing that anyway because I want to bring across how important certain developments are and lend my support to the findings of the report. So the chilling effects now emerge in an environment where we have multiple layers of surveillance, where we have and data-driven approaches. One point that came already up, surveillance technology is more powerful, better than ever before, right? It's more accurate. The amount of data that can be collected and processed is larger than ever. The predictive capabilities of data-driven technologies, AI, add so much more threat than before that new approaches for safeguarding it are necessary. Linked to that, surveillance technology now is scalable. That connected with the invisibility of many things increases the threats we see. We have multiple layers, the business-driven collection and processing of data in our online environment, and systematic surveillance of public spaces online and offline, that combined with attempts of weakening security measures such as encryption leads to less space for openness, less space for experimentation, less space for building coalitions. We have a vastly expanding market of off-the-shelf intrusion tools that were not around a decade ago. And the normalization of surveillance that comes with all this plays a major role too. All this driven by security focused narratives, by narratives of efficiency. And let's think of the administration of public services, etc. And we also need to keep in mind that surveillance infrastructure can be repurposed, something that starts with good intentions, legitimate aims, is easily expanded to pursue other goals. And all this leads to these cumulative effects that the report highlights. And then on top of that, all this is just part of a toolbox of possible control, censorship, overbroad laws, open attacks online and offline, physical surveillance of people, etc. And all this at the same time doesn't affect everyone in the same way. Last year, we released a report on data processing, the right to privacy, and discrimination and inequality. And I think the main message I would take away from that is that the digital surveillance and data-driven technologies repeat and reflect traditional patterns of discrimination, often with intersectional impacts. Past practices, prejudices are incorporated in data sets, in resulting models, etc. But they're also reflected in the decision-making around what tools are being deployed for what purposes, in what context, and affecting which communities. Surveillance and predictive policing methods often applied to monitor minority communities. It's something that we have seen in many countries, for example, post 9/11, with a very strong focus on Muslim communities. But we should also think of, for example, access to social services, which is increasingly digitalized. And when I said it before, little side note, I'm aware that I'm very critical here, I'm very negative. There are advantages, there are benefits to these efforts, but we're talking about the larger environment that all contributes to problematic effects. So who is affected by social services? Who are the benefits? And what does that mean in terms of, sorry, now I'm rephrasing. We know that access to social services has often been limited or linked to providing extensive information. So low-income people have to release more information about themselves to the state. Often that disproportionately affects women and members of racial or ethnic minorities. And that's being perpetuated in the digital realm. In the context of reproductive health, we know that apps collecting data are being accessed by police, to prosecute, for example, abortions that are criminalized in several countries. LGBTIQ plus communities have experienced disparate impacts of, for example, monitoring of dating apps. And we also see increased surveillance in areas that are less strictly protected, less strictly regulated in the migration context, for example, with new tools of emotion recognition, behavioral surveillance at borders, etc. So to conclude, chilling effects are pervasive. The cumulative impacts and compound harms are a growing problem. And they need to be central to the human rights analysis and to finding solutions to these problems. They need to be considered in the analysis of necessity and proportionality. And it's essential that states put the surveillance harms experienced by women, minorities, marginalized people, and people in vulnerable positions front and center. These are not marginal issues. They go to the heart of human rights protections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. I was about to ask, more digitalization of the public life, more surveillance. So how do we handle it? Is it a good thing to see the digitalization or to encourage it, or we are also encouraging surveillance? Because we can prevent the data collection, right? But at the same time, like you mentioned, it disproportionately affects minorities. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm coming back to you because you are from Brazil. You work for an important organization, Connectas. I'm not going to tell Connectas humanitarian ritual. We know that Brazil is one of the countries with a higher digital activism. And that this activism also, we have seen it in more around election and the time of the referendum or all of these things. So in your perspective, when we talk about the participation and peaceful assembly, what is your experience as someone that is coming from Brazil, and how civil society feel about these chilling effects of surveillance?
Thank you, Clema. Okay, 5 minutes. Thank you, Clema. Good afternoon. I would like to especially thank the Special Rapporteur, Gina Romero, and the entire research team for the opportunity to share our perspective insights on the challenge of digital surveillance and chilling effects in Latin America. My name is Arques Cruz. I'm International Geography Officer for Conectas Human Rights, NGO based in São Paulo, Brazil. Latin America continues to present profound risks for those engaged in the defense of human rights. Human rights defense across the region frequently confront a combination of threats that include arbitrary detentions, unlawful violence by state and non-state actors, and increasingly sophisticated forms of digital surveillance that undermine civic space. The findings presented in the Special Rapporteur report strongly echo concerns that civil society organizations in Brazil have documented over many years. From our perspective, the Brazilian experience offers a revealing example of how expanding surveillance infrastructures can affect democratic participation and fundamental freedoms when adequate safeguards are absent. As highlighted in the report, narratives centered on the security have increasingly served as an argument for the adoption of surveillance technologies with broader monitoring capabilities. In Brazil, public authorities have repeatedly justified the acquisition of advanced monitoring technologies as part of efforts to address the organized crime. However, the expansion of these capabilities has generated serious concerns regarding their compatibility with international human rights standards. Those concerns are compounded by insignificant shortcomings in transparency and accountability. Oversight structures remain limited, public information regarding operational practice is often insufficient, and opportunities for independent scrutiny by civil society are unusual. As a result, important decisions concerning surveillance technologies have largely developed beyond meaningful democratic debate. Investigative reports and public disclosures have brought attention to a number of surveillance initiatives implemented in recent years, especially during Bolsonaro administration, including Harpia, Cortex, Project Excel, First Mile, and Arguity. Although differing in scope and in technical design, these systems collectively illustrate the increasing sophistication of surveillance capacities available to public authorities. Another case I would like to briefly highlight is the growing use and implementation of facial recognition systems for public security purposes in Brazil. Bill number 2338 of 2023 is currently being discussed in our National Congress. It's related to AI uses, and among several critical points, there are serious concerns from the civil society perspective. And there is one regarding the continued authorization, development, and use of facial recognition technologies, which has resulted in discriminated collection of personal data conducted without any public scrutiny and has already led to unlawful arrests. The current wording of the bill classifies the use of these facial recognition technologies as excessive risk, even prohibit, but there's an exception. It creates exception when applied to public security. In short, provisions included in this bill not only legitimize highly invasive surveillance practice, but also fails to ensure extension of safeguards necessary for the protection of the rights. As it's widely known, the use of these facial recognition technologies in public space has the potential to massively violate human rights and deepen racism in police practice due to gender racial bias embedded in these technologies. Other problematic bills have already introduced in our National Congress advancing techno solutionist proposals that overlook the real and potentially harmful consequences that these technologies may have for human rights. And it's important to highlight in this scenario that according to Panoptica, which is a civil society initiative, and its monitor of the new technologies in public security in Brazil, more than 99 million people in the country are potentially being monitored through facial recognition system. It's almost half of the country. Yeah, and its application extends way beyond question of the data protection. As Gina already said, the normalization of surveillance can influence how individuals exercise their rights, participate in public affairs, seek public services, and engage with institutions. where uncertainty exists regarding how information is collected, processed, and shared, the result environment may discourage civic participation and weak trust in democratic governance. Allow me to conclude by recognizing this very important contribution of the mandate and to congratulate the Special Rapporteur for this report. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Akias, for bringing the perspective from Brazil, and thank you also, Gina, for bringing these reports. It seems that it's timely and looking at how surveillance is undermining our life and our democratic rights. So I think it's timely. Let's now, you have a chance, another 10 minutes to exchange with Gina and all presenters here. So I would like to start with the practice at the UN, start with member states. Do you have any question from any states? Yes.
Palestine.
Yes, Palestine, please.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to thank the Special Rapporteur once again for her important report. And we have seen the chilling effects happening in the pro-Palestine movement worldwide, and that was mentioned in the report. Thank you. It raises a serious concern on the shrinking of civic space and public debate. And somehow we can summarize that societies become less capable of confronting injustices and complicity and demanding accountability, as we said in the interactive dialogue with you, Special Rapporteur. My question is, one of your recommendations mentioned that there's an approach should be adopted by the Human Rights Council in this regards. Do you envision such an approach or framework? Thank you.
Any tech company here? Oh, states? We are from the states now. Any tech companies to tell us more about chilling effects? No, there's not. Okay, civil society.
I live mine of the One Goal Initiative for Governance. Technically, I'm private sector, but I'm not a tech company, so I don't know. So the following kind of difficult question: how can one enhance chilling effects for something that we want chilling effects for, while repressing chilling effects for something that we don't want chilling effects for? How would we technically go about this?
Other question, I would like to have at least 7 minutes to come back to the panel to respond. Yes.
I'm actually from Czechia as well, just not having a nameplate. With many thanks as well, I have a question which also pertains to your dialogue, Gina, with the private companies during your research. To what extent you were able to really, get the real, some of the big players behind you, and to some extent, what were the bottlenecks behind your communication, maybe with some important players who are making those? I know it's difficult because those big players are probably inaccessible to most of us, but at least there might be some who produce or are very close to producing the cutting edge technologies. Thank you.
We can take one more question and then we come back. Yes. Lithuania, yes.
All right. Thank you, Ignas from Lithuania. Gina, thank you again for the report. We mentioned it yesterday, but it's really timely and it's very important one. I want to touch upon the issue on transnational repressions that's and the chilling that widening means of surveillance also negatively affects the work of journalists, human rights defenders who continue to work in exile. So just a quick comment on that between this nexus, digital and transnational repression. Thank you.
See, your last chance to ask question. By the way, you are most affected by the chilling effects. Why you are not talking? Okay, thank you very much. I'm coming back to the panel, and I think there are questions, Gina, in relation to the. Also, I mean, for me, it's also the responsibility, really. Yes, of course, we can say state is the one that is using surveillance, but there are also companies that produce these products. How impact assessment, risk impact assessment can also include the prevention of such chilling effects.
Yeah,
You have the
so,
floor.
so there are several questions. So the ones on chilling effects, I'm just going to to that, especially I'm remembering the first one by Matthew about the subjectivity that was brought by several, like at least two interventions yesterday. About the private companies, I think that the responsibility, it's of course the states have the responsibility to when they are not only acquiring the different technologies, but also even deciding which technologies they are going to acquire and what they are going to buy. Some technologies are inherently against or just contrary to human rights, like, for example, spyware. And this is something that it has been debated for quite a long time now. Now, what do we do with the other type of technologies? What do we do not only with the technologies, but the adoption of the measures on using those technologies? So all these, we have now in several countries a wave of adoption or creation of new social media patrolling units in police. So why is that happening? I mean, why a country decide to create a unit to surveil citizens in doing a control of their social media? It is because they are actually targeting somebody. They are actually researching like a deep problematic problem. So, for example, some cases of transnational repression in their own country, perhaps, or is it because they want to have a broader sense of who is manifesting any dissent or trying to coordinate an activity around a topic they don't want, or around or coordinate a protest that they don't want, let's say a pro-Palestine protest in certain context, or an environmental protest in another one. So this is the part of the responsibility of the states. But I do also believe that the companies have a responsibility in the design of their own technologies. I am not an expert on technology, so I can be not. I mean, the information perhaps is not refined enough. But then now, when we are seeing how the interaction of artificial intelligence with, for example, the algorithm monitoring or the monitoring of the social media, or how artificial intelligence are being used to actually use the facial recognition data that is collected by the facial recognition technologies, and that articulation, it's something that perhaps companies need to study a little bit more, and then just to have their own human rights assessment in the design of the technology, and then in the provision of that technology to governments and other actors. And I will stop saying that it's not only states and companies, but also which third actors are also using these technologies. Because at the end, it's not only states with good or bad intents, but then it's also other actors. So we see that in Brazil, for example, it's also the criminal actors that are using the drones with facial recognition. So how are we going to also bridge that gap between these non-state actors that with malignant intentions are using the technology, or the non-state actors that are using the facial recognition technology, for example, in other countries, Brazil also, that is seated here in the table, for security reasons in, for example, buildings, and then they are giving that information to the states to do whatever, or what is happening in universities in Europe and the US, in which also universities are collecting information from students, even with facial recognition, and then they are giving that information to the police for whatever other reason. So there are like different actors, and I think that the responsibilities are there, but I do believe that companies have like a huge responsibility in how they do their human rights assessment, but also how they design the product itself.
Thank you very much. Darren, in 1 minute,
I'll
how
be
do you
super
prevent
quick.
it?
I'll just say I'm very aware I'm operating about 30 degrees above my normal temperature. And if you are too, there's hard copies of the report in the corner and it'll make a very good fan. So I'll deal with the two chilling effects together very briefly. At the core, when evaluating the test under human rights law, we're talking about the necessity test. At its most simple, the necessity test is a way of weighing the competing interests that are at play. So on one hand, we have the protection of public order, the prevention of crime, and on the other hand, we have the harm to human rights, so the harm to freedom of association, assembly, expression, and so on. What we've seen so far, well, I'd say first, we focus on certainty. We say, you know, how do you quantify chilling effects so that you have a precision for the necessity test? I'd start by noting that the necessity test isn't based on certainty. It's based on potential. It's based on potential utility and potential harm. When we evaluate the potential utility of facial recognition or other surveillance measures to crime fighting, we don't know how many crimes are going to be prevented. We have to bring the best evidence forward. So I'd say that we have an almost false equivalence between the utility and the harm that should be weighed. What we've seen so far is that we focus exclusively really on the potential utility and we've minimized the harm. So we've really ignored the chilling effects or only brought them together in a very, very narrow sense. And what Gina's report shows is that not only that the effects of the impacts of the chilling effects are really profound, but also that the likelihood is very high. So at the core, I think, and it comes to the question from One Goal Initiative, what is really essential is almost a rebalancing of the necessity test so that states are required to evidence the potential utility to a much higher degree because we have a lot of techno-optimism or techno-solutionism without really underpinning evidence. And the second, or the flip side of it, is that chilling effects understood largely, as is documented in the report, are really brought into question so that you have a fair necessity test, because without that, you'll always have an imbalance in favor of surveillance.
Thank you very much for digging a little bit on the report. And then before maybe handing over the floor to Ambassador I want also to thank Gina and your team, and I'm seeing Sonia here. So thank you very much. Ambassador, you have the last.
Thank you, all of you. Good afternoon again, and thank you to join us. And of course, thank you to Special Rapporteur for his report. It's a report analyzing the chilling effects and digital surveillance, as you know. And I'm happy you can see that also in here. Yeah. And this is really, as Clement mentioned, discussion both timely and necessary. So I hope we can continue in deep debate in this topic. Thank you. Good afternoon to all.
Thank you, everybody.